Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to the APAJO webinar on responsible gambling in Portugal. My name is Bernardo Oliveira Neves and I'm the Secretary General of APAJO. And we're here today to discuss the status of responsible gambling in Portugal and to provide a snapshot of how RG is being approached in Portugal, namely by operators which are part of APAJO, zooming into specific topics. As representatives of the members of APAJO, we have today with us as two of the speakers, Adélie Arbeille, Group Anti-Money Laundering and Responsible Gambling Manager from the Betclic Group, Stefano Doltsinis, Machine Learning Technology Manager from the Kaizen Gaiming. And we also have the pleasure of welcoming today two representatives of two partners of APAJO in Pierre Jordaan, Regulatory Compliance Service Managers from eCOGRA, and Tiago Bessa, partner and a lawyer at Vieira de Almeida. We would like to start by giving the opportunity to each of the speakers to tell us a bit on some of on what they want to share with us today. And without further ado, passing immediately the word to the speakers, I would like to address Adélie regarding how the Betclic, as one of a leading European operator with a long history in the French market, what are the learnings that have been taken from there that can also be applied in Portugal? Hello, Adélie.
Sorry for that very rookie mistake. I was on mute. So I was just saying, hello, my name is Adélie. Welcome to everybody. I've been working at Betclic for the last 3 years. And as most of you will know, Betclic Group is well implanted in France. So I'm here today to talk about the learnings we've had in the last 3 years regarding responsible gaming in France, so that we can discuss a bit further how it's going in Portugal and parallels and differences in between the two. So to give you a bit of a background, our regulator, the ANG, actually started really to define the background regarding responsible gaming with some guidelines that were published in 2021. And these were especially interesting for us because for the first time, they were actually defining what was problem gambling, and so what were our obligations in terms of responsible gambling. The definition we were given was the following: gambling with negative consequences and a possible loss of control. And in terms of obligations for us, and so what we had to do as a regulated operator, they were quite clear that our main goal was to identify the earliest possible a majority of at-risk players. Following these guidelines, we started an exercise internally that was driven by the fact that we have, on a yearly basis, to provide some action plan to the authorities in which we described, against the guidelines that were given, what we've been doing and what we are planning to do. So we started brainstorming internally and set up a bit our expectations in terms of where we wanted Betclic to be in and at. And we've defined a strategy towards 2025 that aims at having 100% of our players in control. This is actually achieved by 4 pillars within our RG framework: prevention, detection, sports, and education. I'm going to start with detection because that was the one we spent the most time working on. I know that one of the speakers is going to spend some time also speaking about machine learning and algorithm, so I'll be quick. But basically, we started in 2020, a bit before the guidelines, to get out of our classic SQL requests, so former data threshold that we had on specific features to identify high-risk players, to go toward a data science driven model that based on different features will give scores to our player. And based on the score given by the algorithm, we are breaking down our players into 5 categories: the no risk, low risk, medium risk plus, and high risk. Everything that is below a certain threshold is considered no risk or low risk, while everything that is above is considered as at risk and then being manually reviewed by our agents in order to determine and confirm the score given by the algorithm. I'll be quick on that, but our algorithm is composed of 60 indicators that were given either by the regulator, either by us based on learnings we had from use cases. So we've got indicators that are about frequency and intensity of the gameplay, behavioral changes, also use of the responsible gaming tools or features such as self-exclusions, change of limits, among others. This algorithm and the rating that are subsequently following the algorithm results are actually allowing us to have a tailor-made approach, which I'm going to detail in the very bottom-up lines, and we can get into details if you got some questions afterwards. So basically, what we've established is that we've got 3 types of players, and that for each of these players and group of players, we are having prevention and support that are tailored to their specific categories. So we've got prevention and support for all of our players, and that will be newsletters that we're sending 4 times a year that are promoting our tools internally. That's also been some display changes into our tools. So we've made some work in terms of the limit setup so that it's easier for the customer to set up a profile and to understand exactly based on his profile how much he's been playing and if it's in line or not. So this kind of things have been actually implemented for all of the players. And then we've established that we had some players group that were more exposed and presenting potential risks. This was established based on analysis. And here, to give you a bit of an example, we established that the young players are more keen to present some problem gambling habits. So for the 18 to 25 years old, we've worked on recommendations regarding limits and profile limits that are below what we would recommend to a player that is above this age. We've also identified, for example, that players that are using quite often the self-exclusion tools, so I'm talking about 5-10 times a year, might not be in control. Although these tools are designed for them to be in control, the fact that they're using it so much in a given period is actually highlighting that they have some difficulties. So here again, we've been enforcing some automated communications towards these players each time they're reactivating their account after a given number of times of being self-excluded. And last but not least, the players at risk. So these are the ones I was talking, identified by first the algorithm and then confirmed by our teams internally. And for these categories, what we've implemented is a graduated approach for the medium risk to high risk customers that is actually broken down into 3 different areas. So the first thing was an adaptation of marketing animations and promotions. So that means that if you're a medium risk, you're going to get a reduction of the editors, the offers we're going to get to you. And if you're high risk, you're not going to get any. Same thing in terms of bonuses. You're going to get reductions if you're medium or medium plus, and you're not going to get any if you are high risk. The second aspect of the tailored approach we've implemented concerns communications. Here we've defined specific emails, types of communications that are to be sent to each category of player. So medium risk players will, for example, get some very specific emails on the key responsible gaming indicators we've identified on their account. So for example, if the customer is a bonus chaser, if he's playing at night, we've got specific templates of emails that are being sent. And for high-risk customers, we've got personalized communications in which we're calling the player, we're recommending him limits that are based on investigations and discussions we've had with him regarding his affordability. So that's roughly an idea. And of course, we have insert the personalized monitoring. For any given risk category, we are reviewing with different frequency our players. So medium risk will be on a monthly basis, high risk will be on a weekly basis. To finish quickly, we've also dedicated a lot of our actions towards training internally in order to be sure that our agents working on responsible gaming, but also our customer service agents and our key account agents are well trained to responsible gaming issues. So we've developed a partnership with GameCare, which is a UK NGO that's been training. So it can actually depend on the format of the training, but it can take 3 to 1 full week, during which the NGO is training our agents in terms of really players' reactions, players' behavior, how to handle each different case that an agent is going to face in his day-to-day activity. Worth noting too that GameCare has been helping us a lot with the content of our emails and communications to our players, to be sure, because it's a sensitive topic, we have the right words to address the right situation. And last but not least, in terms of prevention and awareness, we are really proud to actually be launching this year and this week the first responsible gaming week in Betclic, which means that internally it's 1 full week during which we're doing shadow sessions, trainings for our employee, webinars, talks, but also externally communicating on our networks regarding what we do, how we do it, and what is our goal, what is our objective. So in a nutshell, that's what we've been implementing in France and the learnings we've been going through and getting.
In the sense of making sure that we're evolving into a future where there is an horizon line of 100% of players in control. That sounds a very good objective to pursue. I would like to approach Pierre at this moment. Pierre, APAJO has approached eCOGRA with the perspective of certifying the responsible gambling manual that was prepared by the association last year. Can you tell us a bit about how the process is going to unfold?
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Bernard. Welcome everyone. As Bernard said, I'll just be talking about how we review compliance with the responsible gambling manual when we do our assessment. Maybe just a bit of background from myself. I've been with eCOGRA for the last 5 years, working in the online gaming space. And prior to joining eCOGRA, I was working with one of the big 4 auditing firms, big 5 auditing firms, working with the land-based casinos. So I've got some exposure to both industries at the moment. As Bernardo mentioned, when we do our assessments against the responsible gambling manual, we will use some of our auditors with some expensive experience in this responsible gaming practices. And the objective will be to make sure that we minimize any effort when we do our review. What I'll be talking about today is just mentioning some of the trends that we see across the markets, some of the common requirements across the board and some of the similarities, and then just what we look out for when we do our assessments, so the typical inspections that we do with operators and with clients when it comes to this topic. So the Responsible Gaming Manual is divided into two main sections. So it's firstly the provisions that's provided by law. So those will be the main ones that we'll be focusing on. And then secondly, the additional measures which APAJO members are required to comply with. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly highlight what we'll be looking out for during our assessments and what we'll expect to see clients and members adhering to. So the first one is a very obvious one, is the identification and verification during registration. So this is a very common requirement. We see this across all regulated markets. So in Europe, Northern America, Latin America markets, again, it's a very common one. Maybe in the unregulated and .com markets, it might not be this common, but in terms of the industries that we work with, this is the first one that we see across the board. Then secondly, it's the regulator calendar, or what's allowed in terms of being offered when it comes to sports betting. So again, it's a very common one. A lot of the regulators will have a calendar or will have a set of events that's allowed to be offered. Then when it comes to the responsible gambling limits, deposit limits, spending limits, so this is something that we spend a lot of time on when we do our certification, whether it's on a platform perspective or on a games perspective. We look at all those combinations and permutations, making sure these limits work correctly and they work in line with what the regulator expects. So when testing individual games or platforms, this is quite a key area for us to focus on, making sure the system works correctly and the configuration behind the system. Then secondly, links to easily access gameplay, stakes and losses. Again, this is something that's very important for us. A lot of the regulators also look out for this. So when we do our assessment, we always want to see that it's easy for a player to access the links, making sure that it's easy to understand the stakes and the losses that's been incurred. And again, across the board, so all the different angles from the website, making sure that it's easily accessible, something that's very key for us to look at that. Apologies, I see someone turned off the light here in the office.
One of the been positioning itself in general hello. I was saying, can Stefano, you tell us a bit about the work that has been done with the machine learning in the service of responsible gambling?
Hi, Bernard. Thank you very much. We had the situation. I couldn't hear you for a moment, but yeah, of course we can. So as you mentioned, Kaizen has developed an AI tool. But before we get in the details of this tool, let me just first say a few things, give a little bit of context, say a few things about Kaizen, and a few things about myself, and let's move on. So I'm a machine learning technology manager, and you might be wondering what a tech guy is doing here in such a discussion. However, we use technology a lot in Kaizen, and we use technology a lot in order to support our customers and provide services to our customers that are of best quality. Kaizen Kaizen operates in 11 markets. It operates in Portugal at the moment, but we also operate in another 11 markets. And we consider our platform as an entertainment platform. And that's where everything starts, because we want our customers to see it in the same way. However, we do understand that there might be cases that people lose control and they might be playing in a non-responsible way. I can't see myself. I will assume that everything is fine and I will continue. So for this reason, we have a dedicated department. We have a department that monitors our people and try to provide the best support to our customer towards this direction. Our department, our specialists, try to support the people, try to inform them in order to bring awareness what their situation is. They try to educate them and educate them about the tools that they can use from our side in order to protect themselves. And we have a number of tools. We can talk about it later. And with this in mind, our department monitors our people in a very, very frequent basis. In order to be able to monitor, they have a number of KPI-based alerts, but we have also automated this process. And it makes sense because it's an industry and we're a company that keeps expanding. And in order to support and provide the best of support, the best quality on our decisions, and in order to have the quantity that is required across our customer base, we need to automate this process. And machine learning is a technology that can support and automate decision-making processes. So we have developed such a tool, but before I get in the actual process and how we did that, let me say a few things about machine learning and the technology itself to give a little bit of context so we can understand how it's utilized. It's very interesting because machine learning is inspired from biology, and it's inspired from biology and how humans learn. There are a number of different areas in machine learning. I will mention two because these are the two that we also used in our case. We have supervised and we have unsupervised learning. I'll start from the latter. In unsupervised learning, you actually try to do what the word says. You try to learn without any supervision. And every human being does that every day from the beginning of their life. You take signals from your environment. As like myself now, I see people, I see pictures, I capture the data, and I try to categorize these people. I try to separate them in a way that it would make sense for myself. And this is totally unsupervised. A step further from that is what we call supervised learning. Let's assume now that you do have the data, you do have the same observations, but in this case, you have the supervision. The supervision in our case is someone who tells us that what we see, what we have observed has a certain label, has a name, or is a specific thing, like a person, like a woman, vs a man, and so on and so on. And as humans, we try to capture those features and try to find those patterns that will be associated to this label and that we can later on generalize and use it to identify other similar cases. And this is exactly what we've done for the RG case. So we have developed an AI tool, and what we tried to do is we tried to incorporate all of the knowledge that we have in Kaizen from our specialists, from the RG ambassadors and from the RG specialists into a machine learning model. Once you can do that, you can use this model to identify those cases. And if you can identify those cases, you can support your people, you can alert in a more efficient way, and you can bring the attention to your RG department in a more efficient way, and they can do their analysis, and they can do the checks, and they can follow all of the process of educating and alerting the people as we described earlier. So in the making of this process, it wasn't easy. We faced a number of challenges. I will mention two. and I will start by saying about this label that I described earlier. It's not easy to understand if someone is an RG case. And there is a lot of bibliography about that. And if someone sees the bibliography, you will understand, you will see straight away that nobody is actually talking about the behavior of the person in the platform. So by that, I mean that we actually have partial observability of a person's issues when they're not playing in a responsible way. So what do? We try to use other techniques in order to see how the irresponsible behavior is reflected to a betting pattern. And that was the first challenge, and that's a challenge that we face even now. The second challenge is about finding those features, those key indicators that can help us to identify RG. And we have gone towards 3 pillars in that area. I will just mention them because there are quite a few, so there's no reason on getting in detail. But what we certainly know is that we usually try to identify a point of change, because people usually play in a normal way, and then there is a point that they change their behavior, and they're not playing responsibly anymore. We check for those points in the betting activity. We check those points on casino activity as well. But we also try to see those changing points, and not only changing points, on the financial activity. By financial activity, we mean deposits and withdrawals. A lot of deposit cancellations indicates a situation where someone doesn't have sufficient funds without knowing it. Changing your deposit frequency is definitely an indicator, but I find very important the withdrawal cancellation, which means you have a customer that actually isn't certain about what he she wants to do. You place a withdrawal request and then you cancel it. You place and you cancel it. That's an indicator that you might potentially have issues. Finally, the third pillar that we're using on our features is our RG tools. And RG tools, the tools that we have is essentially the limit imposing. If you impose limits, but also if you change the limits in a very, very often way, in a very frequent way, that shows that you're not certain about what you want to do. So to conclude this my presentation, let's say, we have developed this tool. This is an iterative process because the more cases you have, you improve your model. And you always need to improve your model, and you always need the feedback from your experts because the patterns might change. This is what we're trying to do. We constantly improve the model, and we try to support our customers in that way by raising awareness towards responsible gaming.
Stefanos, thank you so much. Very interesting stuff. It's clear that technology it's a great support despite the challenges, that it's an ever-evolving process, and probably we'll get back to that soon enough. In the meantime, and apologies to all, we had an outage, electric outage on Pierre's side. He's now back. So Pierre, shall we pick up where you were?
Yes, indeed. Apologies for that, Bernardo. So let me just get back to the slides here quickly. So I think for the introduction, I think everyone saw that part. So compliance, part of the eCOGRA firm. I've worked in the online gaming space for about 5 years, and then in the land-based casinos as well prior to this. So I've got some experience across the board when it comes to these topics. So just recapping on the role of eCOGRA. So we have quite a few regulatory and compliance auditors that work with the firm. We focus on compliance, especially online gambling, compliance with regulatory laws, best practices when it comes to gaming. And we are very privileged working with APAJO as a partner on this responsible gaming manual and doing the objectives, minimizing the time and effort when we do this review with all the members. So again, just to recap, the manual is split into 2 different areas that we're going to be looking at. Responsible gaming, firstly, that's provisioned by the law. So those are the main 10 areas, and then additional measures, 5 extra measures that we have to do with members, which APAJO members are required to comply with. When it comes to the first 4, these are very common requirements that we see across the board for all the European markets, Northern America, Latin America. So identification and verification of the player before registration. Again, this is something that's very common across these regulated markets. Maybe when it comes to the unregulated markets or the .com markets, not so common, but where we work, very common for us. Then the sports betting offering that's allowed by the regulator.
Hello,
so
Pierre. Sorry, I believe you're referencing to the presentation. If you could just share it again, as I believe it was dropped when you left, so that
sure.
we can all follow you. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Apologies. Alrighty. So that was the first one, and the second one. The third one is the limits on the player account, so your normal deposit limits and spending limits. When we do our testing, we look at all the different combinations and permutations on the website, making sure these limits work effectively. They cannot be overwritten. So we focus all our testing on the different combinations there. We do quite a bit of testing when it comes to the limits, making sure that our clients and the operators are comfortable that their limits are working. It kicks in at the right time, whether there's time differences and time zones at play. So yeah, a lot of effort from our side goes into looking at those limits. Then the clear link to gameplay and stakes, that's very important for us as well. When we do game certification, platform and website certification, we look at making sure these links are very easily accessible and that it's easy for a player to look at their stakes and losses after each gaming session. When we look at the individual games as well, this is something that the regulator also monitors very carefully, stuff like broken links or players not being able to access their history pages. So again, number 4, this is something that we focus on a lot when we do our testing. Then number 5, the responsible gaming page with a self-assessment test. Again, this is something that we see very commonly across the European markets, or with a local flavor of like a local help center where players can contact when there's problem gambling. So again, this is something that we see very commonly across the regulated markets. 6 and 7, the cool-off period and temporary self-exclusion. Again, when we look at the website, we look at all these combinations and permutations to make sure they work correctly and that they kick in at the right time and they cannot be overwritten. Then the marketing and advertising restrictions. Again, this is something that's very important to us. We've seen a lot of historic examples in the market where regulators are finding operators that's over advertising or mis-advertising or advertising to the wrong audience. I think historic examples, we've seen the Swedish regulator being very strict on this, the UK, especially Spain, also a lot of restrictions on this. So the manual on good advertising practices is absolutely key for us. We like looking at the different marketing materials, whether it's a television ad or a radio ad, and how responsible gambling is being enforced, and how that's also part of this advertising campaign of the operator. Then the 4 requirements which the APAJO members are required to comply with. So firstly, employee training. This is very important for us because customer support is basically the front line here when it comes to responsible gambling. When we interview employees with the operators, we always want to understand the employees' understanding of what training is being provided to them. Is the training up to date when it comes to the regulator's gambling needs and expectations? We normally see department-specific training, so customer support versus a risk and fraud department might have different sets of training. So when we do these assessments with APAJO, we spend a lot of time understanding what training is provided to employees, at what times and intervals they are provided, whether it's upon induction when a new employee joins the customer support, or annual revision, or when there's ad hoc changes in requirements. So employee training is very key for us. Information and awareness of customers and the public. So typically the responsible gaming page, make sure clear information is provided on problem gambling. This is again across the board very common that we see in the European markets, something that's prescribed by the regulators. At any time, a player should be able to go to this responsible gambling page. That is also something that we check during our assessment, stuff like broken links or unclarity, or using a different device where the page might not be accessible. So something that we focus on when we do our testing is making sure those pages are very clear and available. Commitment to scientific research regarding responsible gaming. So this is in terms of participation when it comes to market studies. A lot of the regulators have these market research studies happening. Someone like Spain, DGOJ, they do annual research where they publish click view models and dashboards on their website in terms of what's happening with their players in the market. The DGA in Denmark, Portugal as well. So it is very common to see scientific research and market research being done by the regulator, and then publishing those results and making actions against them. So again, when we do our review, we always want to understand what participation the operator plays into this role and how willing they are to contribute to this research, whether it's from the regulator, from a local university, or a body. So yeah, that is something that we always participate in. The fourth one, commitment to program for early detection on problem gambling. So there's a lot of tools and trends happening at the moment. I know some of the speakers today are going to illustrate some of their tools and ways and player scoring that we've seen Adélie showing us earlier. Problem gambling behavior, scoring of player behavior. A lot of the regulators want to see this proactive method of rather identifying a problem gambling issue rather upfront, being proactive instead of reactive. When we do this assessment with our clients, we learn a lot about the different tools, whether it's an in-house developed tool or a combination of off-the-shelf and in-house tools. We see a lot of interesting IP and triggers and risk measures that's being implemented, and that keeps on growing and maturing. So yeah, every year on year, we see a lot of progress when it comes to the operators working on these tools, maturing their tools, keeping their tools up to date and relevant. If there's a new trend, maybe where there's not a risk criteria, the tool must get updated for this. As Adélie said earlier, it's not as simple as just running a SQL query anymore. There goes a lot of more AI and complicated stuff in there. Then the auditing process, I'll just quickly be talking about what we do when we assess compliance here, and what the APAJO members can expect during the sessions with eCOGRA. So firstly, we've got a preparation workbook that we provide to all the members. It's basically listing the type of procedures that we follow when we do this responsible gaming manual review. It's got a lot of background in terms of what we expect to see. We do this via discussions. It's very important for us to understand that the client understands how the responsible gaming processes and policies to the operator works. We like to interview different stakeholders across different departments. So whether it's someone from customer support or someone from like a risk or a fraud department, discussion gives us a good view of what the understanding is in terms of knowing these processes that's relevant to the employee. Documentation, that's more just the general policies and procedures that we look at to support these discussions. It gives us a good idea of what processes have been implemented, the maturity of the process, and then obviously it sets the scene for the rest of the testing to make sure that they're being followed. Typical walkthrough items is here. We say to the operator, please show us your tools. How do you identify problem gambling? What are the triggers? At what point in time will you identify it? Are they proactive measures or reactive measures? So during the walkthrough sessions, we see quite a few different tools and trends being presented to us, all trying to achieve the same objectives. And then when it comes to the sampling, this is for effectiveness testing. We want to get the comfort that responsible gambling is being practiced on an everyday basis, throughout the year, 24/7, 365. So we do quite a few sample testing across the board over a review period. It shows us the effectiveness of the process instead of just looking at it at a point in time or on a particular day. We always want to see this comfort when it comes to doing our sample testing for this review. In terms of doing the assessment, so we are very privileged being this partner with APAJO, and we really look forward to working with everyone on this. Everyone would have seen some emails going out in terms of scheduling sessions, and obviously any questions. We've got some contact details listed where everyone can contact us. This is a really good opportunity to work with APAJO on this responsible gambling review that we do, and we really look forward to working with all the operators that's participating as members here. I've put some contact details here so anyone can write to us. There are also some direct email addresses which you can obtain from Bernardo. But at any time, any questions or comments, whether it's on this review that we perform or anything else, you are welcome to write to us. Thank you again for
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pierre. It will be great to go through the process of certifying the operators against the added measures that were put on the responsible gambling manual, and it's a good overview to see how the process is going to look like. Tiago, you've been working with the industry now for quite some time, and are the legal support of APAJO also in this market. Can you paint us a picture in high-level way of what is the Portuguese responsible gambling framework? How does it look like?
Sure. Thank you very much, Bernardo, for the introduction and also for the invitation to participate in this webinar. And I congratulate Adélie, Pierre, and Stefanos for the great presentations before me that make my life easier right now. But I'm mindful about the time, so I'll try to go directly to your question. I mean, I believe you all understood that we are a Portuguese law firm. I'm working in this sector for quite some time. We have a footprint also in African countries. But having said that, and I believe you are now watching the presentation, I have a very brief presentation, which I'll go through it very quickly. I just wanted to touch upon 3 topics in order to try to answer to Bernardo's question and try to outline at least some of the trends and improvements that I see in the responsible gambling topic. Going very quickly. So about the Portuguese legal framework, and Bernardo, this is your main question. So I think we can divide the topic, and Pierre already explained this very well, in 3 main sections. So the basic rule applied to all the operators and throughout their activities in Portugal is that they must provide important information regarding responsible gambling. So this can be done through codes of conduct. This can be done through good practices, so advertising good practices, and this can also be done through more focused actions that would allow people and players to understand a little bit better what are the risks, and also that gambling should be a form of entertainment and not a form of addiction. So this is applied throughout the activity of all the operators in the Portuguese market, but they have also an important aspect. They need to devise, so they must devise a responsibly gambling plan or policy before starting the activity. And so this plan is scrutinized by the regulator, it is approved by the regulator, and then should form, let's say, the activities that the online operators must conclude and execute throughout the licensing period. So this is the first part of the framework. The second part, more importantly, is somehow the rights that the players have in this connection. And Pierre already explained some of them. So we have limitations on deposits and bets. This can be done daily, weekly, or monthly. And so the technical gambling system must be prepared in order to endow players to use this kind of rights. Players also have this cooling off period, which is not a self-exclusion, but it's just a restful period where players may decide not to be able to participate in gambling activities. Then we have the more let's say the self-exclusion, which may be temporary for a minimum period of 3 months or indeterminate. And here the Portuguese framework allows players just to self-exclude from a specific operator. So just to submit the self-exclusion request before a specific operator, and then the self-exclusion will be limited to that specific operator, or to present this request to the regulator. And if that is the case, then the self-exclusion will be applied throughout all the markets. So all operators will be notified by the regulator that some player needs to be self-excluded for 3 months or for an indeterminate period. Sometimes this make communications hard between the regulator and the operators, because sometimes when the regulator communicates, let's say, the self-exclusion list, it's not easy for the operators to update completely and then to block a player from gambling activities. This is, of course, depending on activities from the player itself. There is an exception in Portuguese, and I'm for sure in other jurisdictions, which is when the player is banned from playing under a court action. In this case, they are suspended, and there is a notification from the court saying that all operators must not allow a player to have gambling activities. Then we have the interface. So it's the connection between the player and the operator, and here you must have, or the operators must have, information about protecting the players, the policy that they conduct in terms of responsible gambling, and also to create awareness regarding gambling entities that may help more problematic addiction problems. So this must be included in the website. So this is more or less, very quickly, the Portuguese legal framework. What are the trends that we are seeing, and as a lawyer that I can see throughout Europe? Most of them already have been touched by Adélie, Stefanos, and Pierre, so thank you for that. But we see KYC mechanisms. So very importantly, in order to allow operators to know better their customer. And so we are seeing some benchmarks from instance, from the financial sector, where it is now allowed for a direct connection using a smartphone between the undertaking or the operator and the client, just to be ensured that the player that is submitting a registration is exactly, for instance, is not an underage person. So it's not, and it is the person that has the civil identity information that was submitted to the operator, because sometimes there is this problem of forgery of ID information that leads the operator to accept a player when the player has decided to be self-excluded. We have another trend regarding potentially the affordability caps, in order to avoid players from expending money that they don't have. So this was discussed a little bit in the UK market, I think, but not sure if this was approved, because of course this may have some downturns. The risk could be to send the players to the black market, and so to lower the channelization rate, which is not good for sure. The AI tools that Adélie and Stefanos explained so beautifully, so I will not touch on this. And then the payment mechanisms. I'm sure you all learned that in the UK, for instance, there was a ban on credit cards, just to avoid players, more addicted players, to expend money that they don't have, and so to avoid some kind of a loan for gambling. That for sure is not good. Finally, some room. Sorry. Room for improvement. I mean, very quickly, just 4 ideas that I leave to the panel and to the audience. So the first one is this kind of idea of engagement. So in order to tackle better this issue, which is of course very important for all the operators, for all the states, for all the public entities involved, we need different entities to be engaged. So we need players, we need operators, we need regulators, we need civil society associations engaged in trying to control and try to minimize the risk of gambling addiction, and so to have a more responsible gambling policy and actions. And the regulator perspective, in my view, should change from being solely associated with this kind of pathologies of addiction and try to see the responsible gambling in a more broader sense. So it's not only the addiction that may be a problem that needs to be tackled. It's of course the addiction itself, but also the underage gambling. It's also other situations that may not be an addiction, but may pose risks for responsible gambling. The cross-industry tools, I mean, these new technologies that are now being devised by AI, and I was very keen to understand a little bit better the algorithm that Betclic is now using, or even Kaizen, the machine learning that has been put in place. Of course, there are some risks here because this needs profiling. So, for instance, when I heard Adélie ranking the players, so this is a very heavy profiling, or maybe may raise some concerns regarding heavy profiling, which you all know that may pose some problems in terms of data protection, but also in terms of biased artificial intelligence. So if the algorithm is not well trained, it may end up to negative results and biased results. So there are some risks, but for sure that this kind of tools will help in a more responsible gambling landscape. And finally, in this topic was mentioned by Pierre, so I'm very happy for that. Right now, it seems to me that the legislative framework is very passive. So all operators, regulators are waiting for the player to take some stance. So to make a request, for instance, to self-exclusion. It's not, at least in the Portuguese framework, it's not fully allowed for the operator to identify some problematic issues regarding a player and then to may decide, or at least to contribute to a possible exclusion of the player. So I think that at the end of the day, the regulatory framework should evolve from a more passive stance to a more proactive stance. That will for sure protect more players and ensure that responsible gambling policies are more adequate to the new tools that the operators now have. And thank you very much. This was my brief presentation. Now happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Tiago. With our technical problems, I would say that we have maybe a round of a minute to each to answer some questions, and I would maybe go back to Adélie to ask. Do you notice any specific singularities to the Portuguese market compared to others in what regards to responsible gaming? That being either in terms of regulatory landscape or player patterns. Do you see anything with your European pan vision that are specific to this market?
Yeah, in terms of regulations, to be fully transparent, I think we're quite aligned. In terms of framework, expectations, everything that Pierre's been through, Tiago's been through, it's quite familiar with what the ANG is requesting us to do. So I wouldn't say any differences on the legal background. That being said, on the Portuguese players compared to the French players, yes. And actually, speaking about algorithm, we've had, when we launched our algorithm that we use for France with the French training database, we had some issues making it relevant for .pt because we had behaviors that were a bit different. In terms of spendings and frequency and intensity, it's so under analysis, and we've got our data analytics team working still on it, but it was definitely higher than what we are seeing in terms of behavior on the French market. So it's taken us concretely more time to come up with relevant version of an algorithm to be deployed on Portugal, and it had to be a Portuguese adapted version, not an international one like we've done for other markets.
Very well, thank you. That is very interesting, and it actually ties in with the question that I wanted to ask to Stefanos. Stefanos, either in Portugal in specific or anywhere, is this regional differences something which has been a challenge to deal in terms of how the process is developed and the tool is set up?
Thank you for the question. Well, the answer is yes. You have similar patterns in different areas, and that's certain. However, there are reasons for patterns to change, and you always try to use the same model for different regions. However, once you test, you know how things work. Usually regulation plays a big difference, because usually regulation allows people to not play responsibly or not, and they might change the pattern. So usually you see areas with similar regulation, but the same models can work. And when you change, the regulations, you need to go with retrainings, get data, assess, test, and so on and so on.
Okay, very well. Thank you so much. I would maybe go to Tiago, and I believe you touched upon this, but at the very least to confirm, but to also give you a little bit more opportunity to elaborate. Would you say that the Portuguese legal framework, in general terms, expects the proactive measures to come all from the player, and the operators are a bit more confined to creating some conditions for the players to just use available tools?
No, exactly, Bernard. So that's a very good point, and I believe that in fact the idea underlying the Portuguese framework is exactly that. So there is some passivity from the operators and from the regulator, waiting for a self-exclusion request from the player. So of course you may deploy this kind of more technological advanced solutions. But the regulator is very conservative. And so in order for the operators to apply them, you would need to have some specific rules. What do I mean by that? So you would need to have some specific terms and conditions to be applicable. And then the terms and conditions need to be scrutinized and approved by the regulator itself. So you cannot be proactive in terms of, okay, I want to implement this kind of measure. You need to involve the regulator, and the regulator, as I explained, is very conservative. And I believe there is room for improvement here, because usually operators tend to say to us that, okay, we have these beautiful tools, but sometimes we are not able to fully use them, and so that's a pity in terms of a more proactive, responsible gambling planner policy.
Very clear, Tiago. Thank you. And with the little time that we have left, Pierre, sorry. How present would you say in your experience that how usual it is for the added measures that exist on the responsible gambling of APAJO to be present as regulations on other markets? Is this usual, or are the APAJO operators kind of going a bit above and beyond?
No, this is very usual. Thanks for the question, Bernardo. So we see this across the European markets. A lot of the guidance from APAJO, some of the regulators have actually made it law, especially the training, etc. So these are very common topics, nothing unusual. And we also see a lot of the regulators borrowing from one another. So as soon as one introduces a new strict measure, the other ones might borrow from that regulator as well. So nothing out of the ordinary. The 4 points from the APAJO expectations of members, this is something very common, even in the Northern Americas, Latin America markets, and not just European markets. We see this
very
across.
Well. Everyone, it's been lovely to talk to all of you. Very instructive. It's a pity that we can have a little bit more time for some follow-up questions that I was very eager to ask. But again, thank you all for watching, and especially to the four of you for being present and sharing this information with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.